So this is my first attempt at a live video from StreamYard, and I wanted to address something about the Canadian military procurement system. Um, is it me? Am I the only person in Canada that thinks the military procurement system is effed up? Like, to put it bluntly, how long can it take to get a piece of equipment? And I know that it's frustrated military members throughout the years. I know that it continues to frustrate serving members. It continues to frustrate past members. It continues to frustrate retired generals. I'm sure politicians are frustrated. I know of at least two ex-military fighter guys that have ended up in parliament, and they don't seem to have been able to do anything about the length of time that it takes to procure military equipment. Think of some examples in the past. The Sea King helicopter. The Sea King helicopter replacement got batted around by politicians year in, year out, until eventually a liberal government actually canceled the Sea King replacement, which cost years, decades, and millions of dollars to Canadians because the procurement system was so bad. So what's the deal? I think one of the problems is there's no single person to blame because of the military procurement system. There's not one person you can say that guy is responsible for the military procurement system, or that guy is responsible for a piece of equipment in particular. And if the equipment's taking longer to arrive, then that's the guy that gets fired and we put another guy in place. The system is designed in such a way that national defense defines the military requirement, then Public Services and Procurement Canada runs the competition, and then Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada ensures there's some industrial benefit to Canada, and then the Treasury Board controls the spending approvals. So projects routinely take 10, 20 years to actually come to fruition. And we're seeing the same thing now with the F-18 replacement. We've known for years and years, how long the F-18s were going to last. We actually bought Australian F-18s to supplement the Canadian Hornets so that we'd be able to make the fleet last longer. So then what happens? We get into a competition between a bunch of companies, and they put forward their ideas for fighters. And so we end up basically with between a runoff between the Super Hornet and the F-35, and the conservative government at the time says, we're going to get F-35s. So next thing you know, we're going down the path to get F-35s. We've got an initial order of 35 aircraft, and we're going to fulfill that. And then comes the decision, oh, we're not going to fulfill the rest of the order of F-35s. Now we're going to start looking at the Gripen. And we've been looking at the Gripen now for at least a year, maybe 2 years, maybe longer than that, and still no decision. I don't even know who we would put our finger on as the belly button for the person to blame for the delay. I wish somebody in Ottawa would just get off the pot and make a decision as to which aircraft we're going to get, which aircraft and how many we're going to get, and when we're going to get them. I've heard rumors we're actually thinking about operating 3 different fleets, F-18s, Gripens, and F-35s. I think that's crazy. The Canadian Air Force can barely support one operational training unit for F-18s. How are they going to support an operational training unit for F-18s, for F-35s, and for Gripens? And it's not just a matter of initial cadre training or initial training for pilots. You've got to be then able to man the aircraft with technicians. So you need technicians trained on 3 different aircraft? Really? We can barely maintain enough technicians to support the F-18s. I think one of the reasons the Snowbirds are being put on operational pause is because we've actually got not enough people in the Air Force, and they want to redeploy the Snowbird personnel elsewhere into the Air Force somewhere. So if we can't support what we've got already, how are we going to support 3 different operational training units if that in fact is the plan? It just doesn't make sense. Do we want F-35s? I'm not sure we want F-35s, because Our neighbors to the south have changed on us. They're not the same neighbors that they were 2 years ago. If you had asked me 2 years ago, would it be fine to buy F-35s and will the Americans share all the secrets in the upgrade process going forward? I would have said absolutely. I got a lot of buddies in the USAF. I got a lot of buddies in the United States Navy. And we've been great allies for years and years and years. But the political scene has changed. So I'm not sure that we're actually going to see the same kind of support from the Americans that we've seen in the past. I think what we need to do is reevaluate and see what actually is the art of the possible going forward, and make that a factor in the decision as to what aircraft we actually buy. I know the Swedes are talking about building the Gripen in Canada, so there's an industrial benefit there to be considered. You think the F-35 is going to be built in Canada? Not a chance. There's no way they're going to do that. And I know there's an argument against fourth generation and fifth generation fighter. But the question is, how many times in the future do we see ourselves going into a coalition where we need fifth generation fighters in a coalition? And I don't think anybody in the Canadian government or the military is thinking about that. I actually saw something on the news a couple of weeks ago where people were saying we've got observers looking at sixth generation fighters, and we're actually paying a subsidy so that we can be part of the program to be observers on sixth generation fighter, which is actually crazy. We haven't even decided on the fifth generation fighter or the next fourth generation fighter. If you've got any comments, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll try to address them. But anyway, I am just frustrated beyond belief at the procurement system. So are we saying now we're going to put the Snowbirds on an operational pause for 5 years until we procure the next aircraft for the Snowbirds, and we're going to do that in 5 years? Give me a break. That's like somebody telling me we're going to have an athlete's going to run the 3-minute mile in the next 5 years. It's just not going to happen. The Canadian procurement system is incapable of providing new equipment in 4 to 5 years. If they do provide new equipment in 4 to 5 years, it'll be for the operational training unit for whatever aircraft we buy. It won't be for an air demonstration team. So once again, the Canadian procurement system will fail us. And a number of times in the past, they've failed us. So the Sea King's an example. The replacement for the submarines is an example. The replacement for the resupply ships is an example where we failed. There's all sorts of examples in our history where the military procurement system has failed us. And so I don't believe, for one, that we're going to get anywhere fast with a replacement aircraft for the Snowbirds. And I know many friends and many business partners have put in multiple suggestions for how we can replace the Snowbirds. And I'm not talking about just last year or just last month. I'm talking 10, 15, 20 years ago. People actually put forward proposals in order to replace the Snowbirds or in order to supplement the Snowbirds. If personnel were a concern, then maybe we use a certain class of reservists to fly the Snowbirds or partially man the Snowbirds. I know the Italian team has pilots stick around for more than 2 years. They stick around for up to, I've heard, 8 to 10 years. So perhaps we could have professional Snowbird pilots that could stick around if manning is a concern from the Canadian forces. One of the other things that strikes me as funny is because the procurement system is going to drag on, and one of our concerns is manning the Snowbirds, what about the technicians? So if we think we're going to disband the Snowbirds and redeploy technicians elsewhere from the military, how many of those guys do you think are actually going to go, you're making me move from Moose Jaw? I don't want to move from Moose Jaw. I don't want to go somewhere else. So I'm going to get out and go somewhere else. So this whole thing may backfire and you don't have 85 technicians to redeploy elsewhere. What you end up with is somewhere in the neighborhood of half of that number because half of the guys decide they're going to get out. And again, this goes back to me making my point about how screwed up the military procurement system is and some of the decisions that are being made by high-level ranking officers in the military and by the government. Somebody has to be eventually put in charge of procurement. We have to have a belly button to press, and we have to have somebody who is accountable, because in the civilian world, if you're accountable for a program and you don't deliver on that program, you don't have a job for very long. But the way the military procurement system works, there's no one belly button to press to say that individual is responsible for putting that aircraft on the line for the pilots to fly by 2031. I dare anybody else in the military or in the political world to tell me who is the person in charge of that program that's going to guarantee that snowbirds have jets or some sort of turboprop aircraft to fly in 2031. If I see that, yeah, I think pigs will be flying when I see that. So anyway, this was my rant about military procurement system and how it affects snowbirds going forward. And if you've been watching, thanks for joining. If you watch afterwards, thanks very much for your taking the time to watch the video.